Okay, we're live here at OurGame.ie. It's myself, Shane Stapleton, at Shane Saint, Cahair O'Kane. You can see his Twitter handle there at Cahair O'Kane1, and Michael Verney at ML Verney. Lads, how are you doing? We've a packed show as we always tend to do here. This is the second one of these live weekly shows we've done, and we'll kind of recap on what we talked about last week, actually, Michael, because we were talking about things that no longer exist in the GEA. But there was a couple of comments in afterwards, so there's no harm looking back on them.
Yeah, we got some great feedback in after the show. Obviously, everybody wasn't able to tune in maybe exactly at the start of the show. But Cliona Foley, obviously a journalist that we all know, she said, "You're probably too young to remember crepe hats and the marvellous way they probably leak toxic colour into your brain." So there was these horrible kind of crepe hats, and they were grand for a summer's day. But if it started raining, there was all sorts of paint and colours kind of going down your neck. Darrow Cahair, another journalist, said the little paper badge that you'd pin to your lapel. Yeah, he's definitely come back a good bit in time there, which is a nice one too. Marie Crow, then another journalist, and these are the type of GA stories I love. She said, "I won a school hat competition in 1995. The less said about 1995, the better. But it covered a sombrero with blue." Covered a sombrero with blue and yellow crepe paper to celebrate the Clare hurlers coming home to visit. And she just said she used about 200 staples to keep it together. There was a few other things that came in as well. Pádraig Fanning, this was one of my favourites as well, testing the ash of the hurley before a sideline, or just in general, but in particular before taking a sideline. Adrian Fenton from Wexford would have been a great one for doing that. You don't really see it as much now. William Coleman has an image of an old lady, he says, smoking at matches. It's so alien actually to see somebody with a cigarette in their mouth at a match now. I thought that was gas, and you actually commented and just said using the butt of one ciggy to light the next, which is which is really old school stuff. Shane Dawson then said as well, and this was brilliant actually back in the day. He said flags on the hill. He actually just said, "'Tis a soul to sanitise cesspit these days." Maybe a bit harsh, but the flags on the hill were unbelievable. Like, personally, from an Offaly point of view, I remember the Yabba Dabba Dooley flag. It was massive. It covered like a quarter of the hill probably. That's one of the abiding images from 1994. Rory O'Connor, a journalist along with myself in the Independent, said declining flags started after the Garda confiscated them before a Dublin Armagh game, when there was trouble in some pubs. If I recall correctly, 1995 was the zenith. Around the middle of the 90s was really the time when kind of flags were so in vogue. But some great memories. Even John, our own Jordan, says here as well, "Love watching colour on the hill when teams walk around in the parade before full houses are in Croker in the 1990s. No flags and banners anymore." And he just said hashtag Yabba Dabba Dooley. But that was one of the great things, particularly on the hill. You'd see all that mass of colour, all different types of flags, different types of signs. It was brilliant. It's one of those things, I suppose. It's sanitised now, and maybe they'd say about health and safety, but no, I say bring back the flags.
Cahair, you obviously have been off for a couple of weeks. So last week we were talking about all these things that have kind of disappeared out of GA, and I know in the past couple of seasons even there's the new GA crest is on the middle of the field, and it might say Pell 2017 or whatever the final might be. I used to love the old crest, players getting covered in the dye, that sort of stuff. Is there anything that you kind of miss from the old days of the GA that are no longer there? And even on the banner, the big Sleeve them on one for Tipperary as well, I missed that.
I have to say, I started nodding there when Verney said about the flags. I was actually having this discussion yesterday with somebody, like, and exchanging a couple of photos back and forward, and just like as being too young in '93 to be at Derry's final with Cork that year, but like that is the abiding memory nearly, is the flags, the colour on the hill, just the red and white sea. Like, I suppose when you look now, Derry people don't care that much about the county team a lot of the time, like, and then you have the lack of flags. But then along with that, you had the air horns, which, you know, I was watching back the about the 2010 World Cup from South Africa the other day, and the air horns are not missed. They are not missed.
Oh, they were horrible.
Like oh my God! You know what? I can't even watch any of the 2010 World Cup back anymore because the sound just destroys.
I'd suggest that was the worst. Can't watch it. That was one of the worst tournaments I've ever seen, and like people often go on about Italia 90 and say that was boring. World Cup 2010, I watched every single match because I was hurling in New York for the summer. I was able to go and watch every single match, and it turned me off soccer for about 2 years, even though I absolutely loved it to that point. It was terrible. It sounded like a swarm of bees going around.
it was woeful. It actually would put you off watching it properly. But no, look, the air horns are. No, they're probably not that much out of the football. To be honest, they will bring back flags and leave the air horns at the house.
Michael,
Shane, just another couple of quick ones, Shane, because there was some great feedback. Killian Curran said the car boots opened everywhere around the ground with lads eating hundreds of hang sandwiches in tinfoil and copious amounts of tea in tartan thermos flasks after fitting about 10 lads into a Ford Cortina or a Datsun 120Y. I love this stuff. Hawkers coming through the Hogan stand with chocolate bars, apples and ice cream. Last of the ices, get your ices now, as you said last week. And there's another great one here. Sean Power said, you never hear any more of a person being called out over the PA system to make their way to the county dressing room as some player was unavailable at the last minute. Heard it a few times in Croker during the 80s. Laz Malai from Offaly was one who ended up playing in goal. This is a great little side story. Michael Dignan chimed in and said, Laz had a couple of pints before the match, goes down to the dressing room at half time after being called out over the PA system and ends up coming on at half time. Headline in one of the papers the following day, Lazarus rises from the dead. Just absolutely brilliant stuff. Those things that they'll never have the opportunity to happen again, I suppose, with match day squads and with lads been named. But I love all that old school stuff.
Yeah, I think that's happened to many of us. I remember showing up at a Borris-Lee match once out in Moneygall. Can't remember who it was against, just a challenge match. I came in eating a bag of sweets. Then the second half I actually came in the match as well. Didn't go particularly well for me now, if I recall correctly. Any other comments, please get them in on OurGame.ie. You can comment underneath the video, whether you're on YouTube or on OurGame.ie. So as we did last week, we're going to do a Who Am I? So Michael, do you want to give us the first clue there, and we'll see if myself and Cahair can get it, or if any of the viewers can get it.
Well, I tell you what, fair play to you if you're after get it after this first guess, because it's relatively vague and they'll get easier as I go along. So there'll be 4 clips throughout the hour. This is the first one. I have 2 All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship medals from the 1990s, and I did not play for either of hurling's big 3. So I have 2 All-Ireland Senior Hurling medals from the 1990s, and I did not play for either of hurling's big 3. So people need to start kind of maybe narrowing it down to maybe what county it could be, and then start to maybe thinking. But we'll get gradually easier as we go along.
Yeah, well, I mean, I certainly wouldn't consider Offaly one of the big 3, as I'm sure you wouldn't dare suggest. He had about 30 years of going well in the middle of absolute misery otherwise. So Offaly has to be up there. 2 All-Ireland medals in 1994, 1998. After that, Wexford only won 1. Eau Clare won 2, yeah, and they wouldn't consider themselves a team that has been part of the traditional 3 for 140 years. So you haven't fully narrowed it down, but you've narrowed it somewhat. Okay, we'll come back to that in a bit of time. So we decided one of the topics that we're going to look at today is, last week we looked at who would win a winter football All-Ireland. Now we're going to look at who would win an All-Ireland hurling title if it was in the winter. Now I asked Tommy Walsh when I interviewed him on OurGame.ie last week, and I'm just going to put up a little clip to see what he had to say about it.
Yeah, it's hard to know the teams at the moment. They're what way they are. They definitely suit the bigger, more physical teams, and maybe the more direct, the guys that would play that ball that bit more direct. If you try and play a short game in the depths of winter, when the ball is that bit heavier, the ground is that bit heavier, the conditions are bad, playing the short game, especially in hurling, the skill level has to be so high to perfect it. It's next near impossible. So I would say a team that plays the ball more direct and a more physical team would it probably suit Tipperary as well in the winter, and the fact that their players are starting to get that bit older. To be a short, kind of more condensed championship, and their players, you look at Callanan and Noel McGrath, Paddy Maher, very strong physical team, in fairness to them. So Tipperary, the small ball playing teams now would probably be that bit more difficult.
So that was Tommy Walsh's thoughts, and if you want to see more from him, you can find it on OurGame.ie. Lads, Winter All-Ireland, Michael Verney, what do you think? Tommy's looking at the likes of Tipperary. I think Limerick, really big physical team, and the thing that really impressed me during the league, when the weather was particularly bad, is that Limerick were still playing summer hurling in the middle of winter, and by that I mean they were playing the short stick passes inside their own half, trusting that the ball would go to each other's hands, making it stick. So I think from that point of view, I'd be definitely putting Limerick right up there near the top of the contenders.
Yeah, me and you were both down the Gaelic ground, Shane, earlier on this year. It seems like an eternity going out at this stage. But the conditions were poor. It was very, very heavy. and they were still making this summer game. They were making it flow in the middle of the winter. It was amazing, really. It just shows how much they practice it, and that would just suggest that sort of it would be better during summer, but it would still be unbelievably effective in winter. So Limerick would definitely be have to up there. Immediately when you ask the question, who would I think will win a Winter All Ireland? I think who will not win a Winter All Ireland, and Cork is the one that jumps out miles away. I just, they haven't delivered anything in the winter for a long, long time. Any sort of consistency throughout the league. It's almost, I don't know, is it ingrained in the psyche now that they want the hard ground and the fast ball, and they just seem to get totally bogged down in the winter. So I would nearly put an X through Cork if it was played in the winter. And that's unless every game has been played in Croke Park or every game has been played in Thurles, and maybe it will be, but it's going to be different conditions. It's going to be heavy. It's going to be a slog, and I just don't think it suits their style of play at all.
What do you think, Cahair? I mean, if we look at the last number of years and even the club teams that have been successful during the winter time, now I'm not suggesting that Derry's hurling team is all of a sudden going to win in All Ireland, but you've players from the likes of Schlockneil. These guys seem to excel. Now they'd probably excel every month of the year, but guys like that have done well. Even a couple of years ago, Kilcormac Cahair from Offaly, they did particularly well in the winter time. Our Coola team did pretty well because there's a lot of physical guys on that. So there would be an element of you have to be physically be able for it, because there's going to be a lot of stuff happening in tight confines.
It'd be the physical thing would be huge. Like when you asked me when you sent the message earlier about it, the first team that came in my head was Galway, because so much of what they did was predicated on how physical they were over that spell of time. They obviously. Limerick have come along and matched that, really, and you're right. You think about even though they won the All-Ireland, I always think about what they did in the league afterwards. They looked so good in the National League after they won the All-Ireland, and you're just thinking, you nearly thought that this new superpower had come along and who was going to beat them. They looked, for a spell of about 8-10 months, they looked almost unbeatable, and then the All-Ireland semi-final happened, but. Obviously this year's league they've been flying again, and as you say, that is, you're basically looking at National League form. What is there? 6 different winners in the last 6 years in the National League, is that right? So there's no definitive form book in terms of winter form to go on. And it depends what you want. Like if you want somebody to get into a scrap, Kilkenny. Jesus, no team loves digging down as much as Kilkenny. So
they want a dogfight, just don't they?
Sorry?
They nearly want a dogfight.
Oh, totally. And it suited them, especially in the last couple of years where, and maybe it's harsh on them, but probably fair enough to say that the quality wouldn't just be of the standard that it was when they were repeatedly winning All Irelands. They're still there and they're thereabouts, but they're having to really dog their way to wherever they're going at times. Whereas, don't get me wrong, the teams that won could dog too, but they had probably a bit more class up front. And but that Limerick semi-final is the prime example. That was just pure dog. That was as good a display of work rate and intensity and all the rest of those things that have become cliched words, but it was just brilliant to watch them that day. Just completely outfight Limerick. It was class.
And within that too, and we're talking about Kilkenny there. Ballyhale Shamrocks have won the last 2 All-Ireland club titles, and a lot of what's going to be good about Kilkenny is coming from Ballyhale. So from that point of view, Michael Verney, do you kind of give Kilkenny the nudge over, let's say, the likes of Wexford, who actually have some very physical players, good ball carriers, and there's have had a good league?
Yeah, I probably would give Kilkenny the nudge. As well as that, you're looking at in league games, if TJ Reid is playing and you're looking at just there's going to be more frees and things like that, you're going to have a 99% score rate from him. You're going to have a high percentage score rate from a lot of them, but his ability to win frees, Adrian Mullen obviously won't be around, so he won't be there to win frees, but there's plenty of other forwards there that TJ Reid, you could conceivably see him ending up with 115 or 116 in a championship game played over the winter easily. And then as well, you mentioned about those Ballyhale lads, they've all thrived. Fair enough, they've thrived in Croke Park on All-Ireland final day, but they've also thrived up the country and down the country in bogs at times and very, very soft ground as well. So definitely, and as Cahair says, like when it comes to that, that work rate and that kind of effort, and and a team just expending everything, it's hard to kind of look past the effort that they will bring. Now, it kind of levels the playing field a small bit. It kind of, if you're looking at it, you're looking at class and you're looking at work rate. I'm not saying that class is more important than work rate, but the class comes down a small bit in the winter, and just work rate and effort and kind of the sheer kind of will kind of comes up a small bit. So they definitely come into the equation. But Limerick would be the favourites for me, because I think they're a team for every season, as last year's league and this year's league has shown.
I'm going to sort of to speed through a few of these teams. We're going to go thumbs up or thumbs down from the two of you lads and put them in front of your faces. Waterford, thumbs up or thumbs down of having a chance of competing? Clare. Cork. Tipperary. Okay, I'm trying to think Limerick. Okay, then we're going to go into Leinster. So Laois. I think unfortunately they're not going to really win it in any season. Kilkenny. Wexford. Galway. And Dublin. I think the winter actually would suit Dublin. But so the thing is, it's not necessarily that I'm saying that all of those teams that I give the thumbs up to could win the All-Ireland. It's just I think it would actually suit them. But so we're dismissing Cork anyway. It seems to be the recurring theme here. Is there anything else we haven't said on this, Michael Verney? Any other team you want to vouch for or slate?
No, it's funny, even like it's almost like you're trying to wait in the long grass, even though they're All-Ireland champions. You barely talked about Tipperary, the reigning All-Ireland champions. They were mentioned very little in this discussion. It's almost like you think there's going to be a winter All-Ireland and you're trying to be cute and coy, and once again you're doing PR for Liam Sheedy just like you did last year.
This is absolute lies. Tommy Walsh already blew up Tipperary for us. There's not much more to be said. But it is an interesting thing. The fact that some of those players have 10 or 12 years of conditioning behind them, the likes of Noel McGrath, Seamus Callanan, Bonner Maher, assuming he comes back right. Brendan Maher's obviously and had the campaign with Boris Leach Scott. Yeah, I think Tipperary would be in the conversation. I think some of the concerns about Tip's backline at times, when it's slower weather, you probably do get that extra second to get back, don't you, to be fair? If the likes of a Cathal Barrett was missing, you're probably short a little bit of pace back there. Maybe, yeah. It probably... Are we still looking at a Tipperary, Limerick, Kilkenny sort of we probably are, more or less, aren't we? It's probably... Does the weather really... Does it end up being a determinant factor, or does the cream come to the top anyway?
I think the cream will still come to the top, but it could be a determining factor in a game along the way or something like that, or there could be a particular set of circumstances. It's interesting here. Connor David, one of our viewers on YouTube, says Cork and Clare would not win a Winter All-Ireland. He's the same kind of idea as me anyway with Cork. He said outside bet would be Wexford, and he said you can never write off Kilkenny. You surely can't, yeah.
Okay, so that's that topic. Michael Verney, we're going to get clue number 2 on the Who Am I, and just recap the first one.
Yeah, no bother at all. Connor David actually is on the ball on YouTube. He says he thinks it's a Clare or Offaly player. So I'll just go back through the last clip and I'll go through the next one as well. I have 2 All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship medals from the 1990s, and I did not play for either of hurling's big 3. So that's the first one. The second clue is I won my first and only All-Star in a year where my county did not win Liam McCarthy. So I won my first and only All-Star in a year where my county did not win Liam McCarthy. That's the second clue. Again, narrowing it down a nice bit.
That's a tough one, because we're going back 20 plus years here, Cahair, to try and think of All-Stars. Someone who has 2 All-Irelands but won an All-Star in a year where they didn't win the All-Ireland. That's a tough one. I'm not really too much closer, are you?
I'd wait on clue 3, I think.
Okay, let's move on then. The best manager never to win an All-Ireland. I'm just going to throw it out to you, Cahair, first of all. What manager comes to mind, first of all, when you think best to not win an All-Ireland? And I think we're going to stick to inter-county here, because some of these will probably have done quite well at club.
Yeah, I think maybe it's the inherent bias of it, but just Mickey Moran just jumps off the page. I'm sure he will to a lot of people. For some, you can go through so many different campaigns. Obviously, the closest he came was with Mayo. in 2006, taking them to that All-Ireland final. But he took Donegal to an All-Ireland semi-final. He obviously took Slaughtneil to, and I know you say Club All-Irelands are not in factor, but he took Slaughtneil to 2 All-Ireland club finals, Kilcoo to an All-Ireland club final. He's managed, he managed Derry 3 times. He took them to an All-Ireland semi-final in 2004 as well. He was Derry manager at 29 years of age in the early 80s. Managed them 3 times. Managed Mayo, managed Sligo, managed Leitrim, managed Donegal. And has been successful pretty much everywhere he's gone. Success is relative in some of those places, but he has a remarkable record right from winning his first Tyrone Championship with Omagh in 1988. Just remarkable success for the last, and to still be going, and they've recovered from obviously the heart problems that he had at this stage of his career in the late 2000s. So he has to be well up the debate. Like looking down through the list, I'm not sure that there's too many that have had such a sort of elongated career and have come close in different guises, in different ways, in different places. We have others that went close with a team or a couple of teams, but Mickey Moran's went close several times with several very different teams.
And Michael Verney, anyone coming to mind for you? And of course, any viewers there, get your comments in and any suggestions that we might have missed out on.
Just on what Cahair is saying about Mickey Moran, I couldn't agree more, but you'll have clowns that will say that because he didn't win an All-Ireland, it's almost like, he couldn't win the big one. It's almost like with Klopp, when Liverpool won the Champions League, it's like he won the big one. That doesn't mean that he's not an unbelievable manager. And Mickey Moran has obviously proven it at club and county level. But you do have people, and this is a kind of a problem with the GA in some ways. Success is only viewed as like, how good are they? Is All-Ireland success? Like, is Stephen Rochford a brilliant manager? Yeah, he's a brilliant manager. He comes into that equation, definitely for me. Just because they didn't win an All-Ireland, that doesn't change that much. The fact that they were beaten by, to me, the best team of all time in Dublin, that doesn't change the fact that he's a brilliant All-Ireland or a brilliant manager. But it will change that fact to some people, which I think is a bit ridiculous. Just looking back on the 17 final the other night in the Sunday game, like, how close they came, how agonising, and not like so many people on the list here. You're looking at John Mahan on the list as well. Cahair mentioned about Mickey Moran, and obviously you throw Stephen Rochford into it as well. Obviously associated all with the one county, but Stephen Rochford would definitely be one that would jump out for me, definitely.
Yeah, I think Rochford probably didn't get the credit he deserved, and when he made big calls, like the Aidan O'Shea one actually worked for him. Like, he did shut down the one player that had destroyed them in previous fixtures, Kieran Donaghy, who very few can shut down. I know the goalkeeping one didn't work, but he's the sort of guy who backed himself to make the big decisions, and he didn't just do it because, well, I won't get criticised for going safe. Cahair?
And to play devil's advocate, would you have James Horan in the debate? Because he's the man that put the steel in the team.
Oh yeah,
he's
absolutely.
the man that he's the man that transformed it. And like, to me, in my head, I would have Horan ahead of Rochford.
Yeah, well, he took the team from a situation where they were losing to Longford in the 2010 qualifiers to the next 3 seasons in a row dethroning the All-Ireland champions, whoever was the reigning champions. So he'd definitely be up there. Coming back for the second time, and you often hear that you shouldn't come back for a second stint, but that's not necessarily always the case. But the first season didn't exactly go to plan, did it? I know they won the league title, but just the fact that they didn't get through the front door in Connacht was just such a massive mistake. Well, not mistake, but I mean, that ultimately caught them.
I think is, like, you're right, championship wise it didn't go to plan, but I think had we got another wee bit of time, the fruits of what he did, like Mayo's National League last year was incredible, because like, I remember looking back and writing about it at the time, he made an average of 6 changes to his team for every single league game, and the most of them were up front, and obviously he found a couple of sort of reliable defenders as well, but it was the like, up front, Cahair and full forward, his name escapes me, who played the championship then, but he found the problem in Mayo in that they didn't have any depth. They had relied on they relied on, if I'm right, 21 players across all of their All-Ireland finals. They'd used pretty much 21 players for any significant game time over a period of almost 7, 8, 9 years. You know, a club team wouldn't survive on that. You know, they had absolutely no depth, and I think that his National League last year went towards solving that, and I think they probably went very hard at it from very early in the year to do that, and I think their championship suffered for it, and I think you might have seen the fruits of all of that maybe later this year or into next year. Now that's maybe, I don't know, maybe that's a wee bit unrealistic, but I actually thought that he didn't get enough credit for the job that he'd done last year.
Can I put it to you that, you know, like Rochford's perceived mistakes, for example, the goalkeeping issue, that really came back to bite him in terms of the amount of criticism. And like Horan obviously had a longer first reign, but his chance to win an All-Ireland for sure was 2014, and I think that was quite unlucky because the two players obviously clashing heads. You had the referee giving an awful lot of decisions Kerry's way. I think Shane Enright should have been sent off for a yellow card and then a black card, and he wasn't, and I think things conspired against them because they played a great level of football. But 2013, when Dublin had Owen O'Gara basically on one hamstring and Rory O'Carroll was going around concussed, I don't think that they reacted to the situation on the field or on the sideline, whereas Dublin, as they showed last year, Stephen Cluxton came out and played as an extra man at the back. And maybe if Mayo were a bit more switched on, and that starts on the sideline, maybe they'd have an All-Ireland Cahair.
Possibly, but your last point kind of goes back to your first point, and Stephen Cluxton coming out and playing. Like, David Clark's a very different goalkeeper. David Clark is probably the best certainly the best shot stopper I've ever seen. You know, he is absolutely unbelievable, but he's not comfortable with the ball in his hands, and he's not comfortable with the ball at his feet, and that was why, you know, it went horribly wrong. The decision to drop him and play Rob Henley went horribly wrong, but you could see the logic behind it. And when you watch back the first game, you know, Mayo struggled so badly on their own kickouts that was why the decision was made. He felt Henley was a wee bit stronger off the tee, and so he wasn't afraid to make, you know, he wasn't afraid to make big decisions at all. Rochford, this is, but that goes back to David Clark. You know, I don't think he'd be comfortable coming out marking a man. He's a shot stopper. He's a traditional goalkeeper, like a very good on their high ball and a very good shot stopper. But I wouldn't like him left 1-on-1.
Even if the other guy didn't have a hamstring.
Well, maybe chance him with that. But look, you probably have a point there, like that they didn't react. But that was, you know, that is something that we've only really seen over the last 18 months, this innovation to, you know, when I remember the first time that I saw it was covering Ireland in the international rules over in Australia a couple of years ago, and the Australians played their goalkeeper, and Conor McManus played their next defender on Michael Murphy and pushed everybody. You know, they left no goalkeeper, and I don't know whether it's come from that, and maybe some of the players in that team or some of the coaching staff have brought that home and said, geez, you know, that was, he probably didn't even get the value of it on TV, but being there in the stadium, it was, you know, so just unique, and it was gutsy in a way. Like, I suppose the international rules not live or die who wins it, but it, you know, it was definitely something I looked at and thought, there's an idea.
Yeah.
You know, and we've seen it now over the last 18 months in Gaelic football. We've seen it. Yeah. Like, I remember the first Castle Rahan in an Ulster club game, was the first that I saw do it, against Owen Rua, where they were down to 13 men and they brought their goalkeeper out and he played in the middle of the field pretty much for the last 20 minutes, and they come back from, I think they were 8 down, come back to 2. You know, so it's catching on, and I think it will become a more marked feature of it.
Michael Verney, have you any thoughts on that particular one, or do you want to move on to another manager?
Is this the best goalkeeper never to win, Sam, or what is it? I'm only messing. There was a couple of other lads that stand out, and they might, like, Kieran McGeeney mightn't be the most obvious one, but I think the level of consistency that he has brought to two counties, obviously, like Kildare, they didn't win too many Leinster Championship matches under him, but they were obviously beaten in an All-Ireland semi-final, beaten in a quarter-final by Donegal as well. He brought an unbelievable level of consistency to a county that had tailed away for a good while. And then he's kind of brought Armagh back, somewhat of a kind of resurgence. They're playing lovely football, probably out of the blue to a lot of people as well. So I think if you're looking at someone who maybe maximises the resources available to him, he'd be one. And I'd say Malachy O'Rourke then on top of that would be another one. Like, nobody would have probably thought that Monaghan would be within a point of an All-Ireland final a couple of years ago, and they were. And he made them a really slick, well-oiled machine, kind of was maxing out everything that he was able to get out of them. So they'd definitely be two guys that I think should come into the conversation. And it can't just be managers that get to All-Ireland finals or have been unlucky. I think there's a lot more to that. And that's when, some other names that we have on the list here, the likes of John Evans will come into that list as well. And Liam Kearns maybe with Tipperary and with Limerick. A fella who maybe there wasn't an unbelievable amount of success, but he brought Tip to an All-Ireland semi-final, and he brought Limerick to a Munster final. Do you know what I mean? So success doesn't necessarily have to be winning an All-Ireland, even though a lot of people will measure it that way.
Cahair, actually, there's a point for you, because you'd obviously be watching Ulster football very closely. Ciaran McGeeney, I mean, he did some good things with Cahair, of course, and got to the semi-final in 2010. But if you look at the run with Armagh, it probably wasn't all that impressive. Like, he took over from Grimley and they looked like they were ready to kick on in 2014. He takes over from then on, and it's a long time before there's even a win in the Ulster Championship at all, and I mean even a single match at that point. That's
right. That's I suppose that's the counter argument is record in both provincial championships. Kildare as well didn't do hugely well, even in the years that they did all right in the championship.
They were the qualifier kings, they were always called.
They were a qualifier team, and to be fair, like McGeeney's Armagh team, I suppose, watching them very closely, they're suited to the qualifiers because, as Verney said, they play lovely football, and in the qualifiers you get playing more lovely football because the first round of Ulster, the championship is drawn in November. Whoever's playing, Fermanagh beat them up in Brewster Park twice, and Fermanagh just studied them religiously for 6 months and locked the whole game down, and Armagh just had no way through it. I think we scored 6-7 points one of those games, like that was all they got, and then they got into the qualifiers, and that was the year they ended up in the All-Ireland quarter-final. So they have ability, but I think it precludes McGeeney from being too high up the list, is the Ulster Championship record. He obviously did. He's done a great job in Armagh, and I've always said that A, if they were in another province, or B, if Ulster football was a wee bit more open, that he'd have won things, because he's got a lot out of the attacking talents at his disposal there in Armagh when they're allowed to play, but not always. But just a couple of men, and you're saying about not just men that reached All-Ireland finals, but just to dig into the archives a wee bit, and a name that jumped out at me was Art McCrory and Eugene McKenna in Tyrone. Art was the manager when they got to their first All-Ireland final in '86, and was still there in '95 along with Eugene McKenna, who played in '86. When they got to the All-Ireland final again, Art McCrory won 5 Ulsters as Tyrone man, and Tyrone wasn't a particularly successful county up until that point, and then they left after '96 and came back in 2001. They won Ulster in 2001. They won the National League in 2003, and then 2002, and then left at the end of 2002. Mickey Hart came in and won 3 All-Irelands.
So how much of what they did led to the All-Ireland?
Oh, massively, and anybody in Tyrone would give them huge credit. Now they would also maybe asterisk, and maybe it did need something different. Maybe it needed Mickey Hart to bring it over the line. We don't know, but what Art McCrory and Eugene McKenna did for Tyrone football was huge, and that was a fairly long period of time.
And Malachy O'Rourke was obviously very impressive with Monaghan over a long period of time, and he was coming up against very, very good teams within Ulster. I mean, Jim McGuinness's Donegal, for example, Tyrone under Mickey Hart, and obviously the likes of Ciaran McGeeney's Armagh could barely get a sniff in during some of those years. So, and to get to an All-Ireland semi-final, to be within a point, obviously a few other appearances at Croke Park, and it took a long time to get that first win in Croke Park in decades. But how good do you think he did, and where should he rank in this debate?
Malachy O'Rourke will be very high up on it as well, because of who he's managed, and Monaghan were a common team, before he took them over in 2013. In terms of Ulster football, they were seen as, they'd been to a couple of Ulster finals. They were knocking lightly on the door. I wouldn't say they were hammering it, but they were knocking it. And he came in, and I suppose it was a huge shock in 2013 when they, Donegal were All-Ireland champions, and it was a tactical, and I think that's Malachy O'Rourke's big strength. It was a tactical masterclass over those 3 or 4 years. Other teams really struggled with how to beat Donegal, and Malachy O'Rourke devised, never forget those games over that series, that, with a very definite plan of, they kind of kicked the ball into one corner, and then they recycled it. It was nearly like a rhombus shape back across the field, but it was always done with a kick pass, and it was always skipping a man if it could, so the ball had to be moved very quickly, and that pulled the Donegal defence out of their shape that they wanted to be in, and it was why Monaghan were so successful against them. And obviously then they developed and became better, got to that All-Ireland semi-final, but even back to his earlier career too, like Fermanagh have never won an Ulster title, and he took them almighty close in 2008. Like they beat Derry, with the National League champions. They beat them in a semi-final up in Omagh, and then took Armagh to a replay, and lost Barry Owens to a torn cruciate in the replay, having come off the bench to big effect. And Barry Owens was, he was the best full back in Ireland for a stage, but he was playing a full forward after heart operation at that point. So, he was a big loss in that replay as well. But Malachy O'Rourke's well up the list now, to be fair.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that. Any comments in, Michael Verney?
Yeah, just one in particular from Conor McKenna, and we actually hadn't mentioned him, and we definitely should have. Colin Collins from Clare, who's the second longest serving manager in the intercounty football at the moment, behind Mickey Hart, as far as I know, since Jim Gavin left. And he's brought them to be unbelievably consistent. Even during this year's league, they had a big win in the league this year, minus Gary Brennan, and he was just kind of ploughing ahead without his best player, which many other teams would not be able to do. And he's not afraid, from a journalist's point of view, he's not afraid to call it as it is as well. So I've great time for Colin on and off the pitch.
Yeah, I think Colin, just on that a point, since he took over up until last year, every single year Clare had improved their finishing position in the National League. So there was some mark of consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of more managers that we should probably look at that we haven't mentioned so far. Pillar Caffrey, I mean, he was certainly mentioned. And then Tommy Lyons, of course, who not only was involved with Dublin, and probably not everything went perfect there, I think is fair to say, but he would have had a lot of success with your Offaly, Michael Verney, winning or dethroning the All-Ireland champions Meath in 1997, for example.
Shane, Offaly won the Leinster title in 97 from Division 4 of the league. Division 4, and I remember being at one of the Division 4 games, and Offaly were poor out now, and there's no point in saying any different. He came in, it was the time of the Neutron diet. I'll never forget Tom Coffey, who was a classy enough wing back. He was in decent shape, but Tommy Lyons just told him to disappear, put him on this diet. He came back absolutely ripped. He was ripped, in fairness to him. And he came back in great nick. They were all in brilliant shape. They probably caught a Meath team that were missing some key players in that Leinster final in 97, but Offaly were absolutely hopping off the ground. Everyone remembers Roy Malone's 2 goals. We were obviously beaten by Mayo in the semi-final on a really wet day. I can remember Ciaran MacDonald was playing and did a lot of damage that day. But having done it with 2 different counties, one where it was expected they didn't win the All-Ireland in Dublin, fair enough, but he did win plenty of Leinster titles, and he did it in Offaly as well. And he won a Division 1 football title in Offaly as well. So it's a fair kind of resume from him. Just another person in there, Conor McKenna is in as well, with Anthony Cunningham across 2 codes, which is an interesting one. Would take in the hurling and the football. Obviously, he's still involved in the football and has a chance, albeit a small one, with Roscommon, and obviously very close with Galway in the hurling as well. But Tommy Lyons definitely would have to come into the conversation.
Yeah, and Anthony Cunningham took Gary Castle to an All-Ireland in 2012. Donny Buckley as a coach, worth mentioning. Kevin O'Brien with Corofin. Rory Gallagher, he's done a fair bit as a coach, and maybe hasn't won the titles he'd want to in his own right as a manager. So I think that's most of the guys we talked about. Mickey Whelan as well. Anyone else that we haven't mentioned, or anyone you want to comment on there, Cahair, before we move on?
No, nobody just. I think you just mentioned briefly at the outset, but John Mahon did sort of jump out as well. Took Mayo to 3 All-Ireland finals in a couple of different spells, and was unlucky. Obviously winning the Munster title with Clare as well in '92. So, again, success is relative. Like what makes a great manager, great players. To have at his disposal to win All Irelands, there's probably even looking back, so few Kerry managers come through and didn't win All Irelands at some stage, and then you even look at, because Mickey Ned O'Sullivan was in charge of the team that lost to Clare in '92 and is regarded as a disaster, and yet he went on and took Limerick and nearly won a Munster title with them. So how good a manager was Mickey Ned? What is unlucky, what is a great manager? Like a great manager, I think this is great players and a wee bit of luck to have them at the right time.
Yeah, and obviously Miko won loads of All Irelands, but he was actually very impressive with the counties beyond that, like even Wicklow.
Oh, totally, yeah.
It was short term with Clare, so maybe you wouldn't count that in there, but yeah, he would have been impressive beyond there. Michael Verney, have we got a third clue for the Who Am I?
Yeah, and we haven't got any guesses yet, so people are obviously still confused as to who it could be. First clue is, again, I have 2 All-Ireland medals from the 90s and did not play for either hurling's big 3. Second clue, I won my first and only All-Star in a year where my county did not win Lee McCarthy. And the latest clue, I captained my county team when we were beaten in an All-Ireland final. So an All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship final. I captained my county when we were beaten in an All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship final.
Okay, I think Anthony Daly was more or less captain the whole way through from 92 to 99 or 93 to 99. So I don't think it would be anyone from Clare. So I think that narrows it down to possibly even someone from Burr. So I think it's got to be Offaly. I'm struggling now to think off the top of my head who it could be. Cahair, any thoughts?
Is there a clue 4?
We might come back to that again, and don't forget people get their thoughts in or their guesses in. Cahair,
is there 1990s hurling is a wee bit just before that niche. I need to go back and read a few more books, watch plenty of it, but need to just really tune into 90s hurling properly, because I was only a boy, and there wasn't much hurling in Derry. I think probably the first time I remember properly watching hurling was Derry and Offaly in 2000, the All-Ireland quarter final, as in not watching hurling properly but being invested in it, and we had Offaly on the ropes that day, only for Ollie Collins going off with a bad injury early on, missing a few chances, and we're not sore about it. We're not sore about it.
Do you remember that one, Verney? Do you remember that?
I remember it well. Big Jeffrey was playing the same day as well. Offaly only won by a couple of points and then ended up beating Cork in one of the greatest performances that Offaly team ever delivered the next day. So it's just mad how you can go from so bad to so good in such a short period of time. But I was up there that day in Croke Park and we were sweating for a long, long time.
Cahair, do you recall in 1997, the first year of the hurling qualifiers, that the All-Ireland quarter-final between Tipperary and Down took place in Clones? Were you aware of that?
I knew briefly of it, but I can't say it was there. I can't say I remember too much about it.
Yeah, an absolute classic. When I went up to the Ulster final I'd say it was around 2014, I was just thinking you couldn't have a hurling match here, because the actual height of the post was so low that any sort of a shot, it would be almost impossible to tell, well, for an awful lot of shots, whether it was over or not.
And then an awful lot of lost balls in Clones as well, with the lack of ball catchers.
Yeah. There's a saying out there that an ounce of breeding is as good as a ton of feeding, and I think to that end, Cahair, you did a piece in the Irish News last week, and you were talking all about well, basically the headline was "No amount of feeding can match good breeding," and it got me thinking. This of course ties into family dynasties, and there are some great family dynasties over the years, even like the O'Sheas. I think between Paddy O'Shea and then the 3 brothers that came along, there must have been a run of, was it something like 30 years where you had one of the O'Sheas in a Kerry championship team for just such a long spell. Maybe people get their comments in and let us know their thoughts on that or any other dynasties. But can you talk to us a little bit about the piece, Cahair?
Well, basically, I think at county level, it's probably still quite rare Like the O'Shea's and the Spillans and all the rest, they're still a rarity. And I think the Dublin team currently is probably a wee bit overlooked. The family links to their past successes. Obviously they've had 5 of the current team whose fathers had played for Dublin or had won All Irelands with Dublin. And it is just so hard to beat that grounding around home and having that. You're just absolutely immersed in it from day one. And I think it is so hard at county level for sons maybe don't make the grade, or oftentimes there's a lot of pressure on sons of fathers. That's a big thing. Some young cub and he's 11 years old and Jesus, but he's Mickle's chap. And he's looked at, and some fellas just don't react well to that. But those that do have such a huge sporting advantage.
Imagine the pressure.
And sometimes in their genes.
Can you imagine the pressure? Can you imagine the pressure on Carlo Dwyer going up to play for Kildare when Micko had gone from Kerry and taken over the county? That must have been immense pressure.
Huge, and it follows you about. It follows you about, like you're just son of. You're just unless you really, really make your own, and probably you look at Dean Rock and that that is kind of the level of achievement where you're at, where he's no longer son of, it's nearly Barney's father of now, rather than the other way about. But it's a hard label for a lot of boys. But I think you still do see it fairly rarely at county level, but at club level it can be absolutely everything. Like in the piece, like I outlined the kind of success of Trillick in Tyrone, who just jumped out a mile at me when I thought about it. That they had won a wreck of championships in the 70s and 80s, and then just completely disappeared off the radar. We're down playing a bit of intermediate football, and then all of a sudden now they've won 2 of the last 4 in Tyrone, and are probably regarded fairly as the best team in Tyrone at the minute. And it's all sons of fathers. So many of the team are sons of those boys that won championships in the 80s. It is just, there's no denying that the genes are a huge, huge part. And, I mentioned Korean in the piece as well. Obviously, they've won two Derry championships out of absolutely nowhere. Korean played a Derry junior final in 2000 and were beat by Ardmore, and 10 years later they were senior champions. And they never had any tradition or history or anything, but the McGoldricks all came through. Sean McGoldrick played for hurling and football for Antrim, came from St. Teresa's, married Shira, who was a big swimmer, and native of Derry City. She was a swimmer, and the boys and the girls all swam as youngsters. The whole clan, Sean, Leo, Barry, they were all great swimmers as youngsters, and then obviously the football took over. But that's where their athleticism kind of built from, and and then the nephews or cousins as well, Niall Holly and all that. And I remember doing a piece after they won it again in 2018, and all but one because there was no tradition or history in the area, in the Triangle area as it's called, where they come from, Corey and Port Stewart, Portrush, all but one of the team, their parentage could be traced outside the Triangle. So the parents came from South Armagh, the parents came from Belfast, the parents came from GA families, brought them in, reared sons, and the sons came with this GA background and won 2 championships out of absolutely nowhere. And so for all the feeding you can do, sometimes it's a massive part of your genes and the environment that you're brought up in, and you can't get past those 2 things.
And without doubt, this works in both codes as well. Both with men and women. It definitely happens that way, that you might have a great camogie player that produces a great hurler. Well, Angela Downey and Conor Brown, who's now playing for Kilkenny. But it happens every which way. But within your piece, you were talking about how you could grow up in a county, and the old joke: is it a boy or a child? And in Kerry, you were even saying, or is it a footballer? And what have you. But then, of course, you have another element as well that we must touch on, Michael Verney, which is the curse of the She Mickey. that if you are a man and you want to have a son to play on the team just like you did, but you keep producing daughters, that's something that obviously it's all very immature and it's just a joke really, but that's something you hear about a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think I might have mentioned to you before, my brother is a dairy farmer over in New Zealand, and the aim of a dairy farm is to have as many cows on the farm as possible. Cows have an unbelievable currency. A cow, a heifer cow or a heifer calf is probably worth maybe 10 times more than a bull calf. So that they would inject, when they're doing the artificial insemination on the cows, they would have sex semen inserted in, which increases the percentages of having a female calf, which makes it more profitable. So I often thought if you could do the same with the GAA, and just if you could basically increase the percentages of having lads to produce a hurling team, it would be unbelievable. But that's just a little side note. Something else that Carter was saying, that I kind of have a little flip point to it. He was saying about the pressure that comes with being son of. I also think there are a couple of positives that come with that. When you're picking panels or when you're picking teams and even development squads, I always think if you're son of, you're far more likely to be, brought along, dragged along, maybe so to speak, kept part of the fold, and inadvertently then, like you're getting access to better coaching, you're getting access to everything, and you're almost improving subconsciously almost. It's not something that people maybe do on purpose, but I've definitely seen that in Offaly with different lads that were maybe hangers on Offaly development squads at 14, 15, 16 that were sons of great players, and then they've flourished at minor or they flourished at senior as a result of that. So I do think that's an interesting kind of point on that as well. But like breeding, like I work in horse racing as well. Breeding is massive. Like you look at the Walsh family. You look at Ted, who's immersed in racing. Ted has daughter Katie, immersed in racing, one of the best amateur jockeys of all time. Ruby, the best jockey of all time. Ted himself was one of the best amateurs of all time. I think 10 or 11 time champion amateur. Do you know what I mean? Like you're the chip off the block. It's not on purpose. There are reasons why these things happen, and I suppose your love of it is fostered, and your skills and talents are fostered at a younger age. With a lot of this, it's just more innate in you than a lot of other people, where you could train them and you could bring them to the gym and you could do all this, and maybe just they don't have it. But a lot of these people from the great families, they do. They just have it.
Cahair, do you think there's anything to be said for like it being innate, or is it a case of you're exposed to that environment from a very young age? So let's say you're the father and you bring your son into the dressing room from a very, very young age, and he's exposed to the environment, or is it because he's picking up some of the same qualities, the same skills on the field or whatever, that maybe if that son had a friend whose parent wasn't actually that interested, but they were brought into that environment too, just by dint of being friend of that kid whose father was very good or mother was very good? Do you think it works that way too, or do you think it is innate, like that it is all down to breeding?
Like it can't all be, because do you know what I mean? There are so many examples to the contrary. There are so many county players who, their mothers and fathers didn't even play, had no interest, all the rest of it. And so, it's not just right. Every county player is a son of or a daughter of or whatever it is. So, but like the environment around home is massive. Like I spoke to Nathan Mullins, son of Brian, a few weeks ago, and just chatting about how his Donegal career came about and then never really took off, was short lived. But and he talked about tormenting his dad. His dad taught up in Donegal. They lived up on the border, and obviously Brian was the last man to manage Derry to an Ulster title in '98. And he tormented his dad after school to take him up the road to Marfelt to Derry training. And he used to go in the car, and every night he'd be sleeping sound in the car on the way home. And he spoke about how good Joe Brawley was to him. He always remembered how good Joe Brawley was in those training sessions, and took an interest and talked to him. And he was a cub, he was 8, 9, 10 years of age, and he's talked about how that environment, that grounding, and seeing at that stage of his life what it was to play at that level. Because it's all right coming from the house and somebody telling you, but when you get to see it, I think as well, and being in around the changing room, and the devastation and all the rest of it, and the joy that it brings. And it's just, it is a huge advantage. If you're brought up in that environment, it is no doubt if you decide to go down that route of wanting to be a sports person and being as good as you can, if you're motivated to go that route, then it's huge. The environment is one of the biggest things in terms of the drop off rate at minor level is probably no coincidence. It's when a lot of young fellas leave home to go their own way, leave the environment that they come from, maybe go off to university, and they just for a lot of them the tie isn't enough. They don't. You know what I mean? They're not tied tightly enough to come home to drive, I suppose, up the road. Everybody here goes to Belfast, and you're driving maybe an hour and a half up the road for training and matches, and unless you really want to do that, you're not going to do it.
And the drink. I
think unless you're the drink and the women.
Or for young female players, the men maybe, and the drink.
And the men too.
Yeah. Just a point that I noticed a couple of years ago, the O'Sullivan brothers from Meath. So I think a lot of people would know Killian O'Sullivan, who plays in the forwards for Meath with the ponytail. His brother Mark was playing with the County Hurlers, and then Hugh was an Ireland under-20 rugby international. Now I'm not sure if their lineage other than that. That's something that stuck out. Is there any other family dynasties that stuck out to you, Michael Verney?
Just three off the top of my head. One would be the Jacobs down in Wexford. Obviously, Mick Jacob, Wexford legend. Then obviously sons Rory and Mick Jr. and then Ursula in the Camogie sphere. The three Dooleys. Just on what Cahair was saying there as well. Joe Dooley would have been maybe 5-6 years older than Johnny and Billy, and he would have. It's like the positive example that one of the elder ones in the family can set. If he's mad into hurling, that type of thing, he can drag the lads along with him. Something like that. So that would have a big effect as well. And then that could have been something similar that happened with the Wheelatons in Burr. Obviously, Father Pajo won a load of titles with St. Rhinus and was the manager of the Burr team that the boys won. Two of them were involved. Simon and Brian were involved for 4 of the 4, and Barry was involved for 3. And obviously Brian, the Millennium Man as well. So it's like, as I say, he didn't lick it from the ground, and a lot of people don't lick it from the ground. But one outlier that I remember, because I did a piece with him maybe 6 weeks ago, was Carol O'Connell from Monaghan, who hadn't played football at all until he was 17, which is absolutely astounding. And to hear, you obviously hear all these great family lineage stories, and then to hear something like that, which is totally against the grain, to go on and be one of the best wing backs in the country and be an all-star 2 years ago, is pretty astounding, considering that, they talk about the 10,000 hours of practice. And when he got to 17, he had zero hours of practice. So he's almost playing catch-up, but he was able to play catch-up and be a brilliant player at inter-county level. But yeah, there's always a lot of really good families. Jacobs, Dooleys and Wheelatons would be the three that stand out for me, outside of the O'Sheas and Kerry.
Yeah, the Donnellans in Galway would stick out, the Fennellys in Kilkenny, Brogans in Dublin. Anyone else come to mind, Cahair?
Edith McGuigan's up here in Tyrone. Frank, Brian, Tommy Jr.
Martin McHugh. Martin McHugh then with Ryan McHugh.
Yeah, the Kiernans in Armagh. Joe was obviously a great player in his own right. In the Armagh team that got the All-Ireland All-Ireland final in '77. Beyond that,
I'm sure there are loads more, and people can get their comments in if we've missed any. Any other comments in, Michael Verney, before we move on to that final clue in the Who Am I?
Yeah, I had two people with the correct answers. Connor David and Saoirse Wolfen, who's the Wexford hurling coach. Glad to see that he's tuning in. He also had the correct answer. I won't quite call it out. I'll call out the last clue here now. So you have all the other clues so far. 2 All-Ireland medals from the 90s. Didn't play for the big 3. Won my first and only All-Star in a year. My county didn't win the All-Ireland. I captained my county when we were beating the All-Ireland final. And if you don't get it after this clue, there's something seriously wrong with you. I said, this is the clue. I once said, we're taking this match awful seriously. We're training 3 times a week now, and some of the boys are off the drink since Tuesday.
That has to be Johnny Pilkins, and I only interviewed him not so long ago. Am I right?
The one and only JP. Who else could it be?
Yeah, great bit of stuff. Before we finish up, lads, have we it all said? We nearly do we, Cahair?
Sorry?
We nearly have it all said at this stage, do we?
I think so. I think we've read up right, but I don't even know how long we're on there. It's been 3 days, is it?
I think we are. Well, look, thanks very much for joining me, Cahair, Michael Verney, as always, and I'm sure we'll do it again soon, lads.
Thanks, Shane.
Thanks, lads.